Hey, I'm Rafi Sofer, and this is Q Division Studios. Why don't you guys come on in? So this is Studio A's lounge. Plenty of room to hang out and chill out. There's lots of baffles for your session later. And there are cues hiding everywhere. There's one cue over there. There's also farfisas hiding everywhere. If you ever need a farfisa, there's one under the radio. Come, let me show you guys around. This is Studio A's control room, where most of the heavy lifting takes place. Well, obviously the main cool thing about Studio A's control room is the Neve. It's an 8068 from the 70s. It's a quadraphonic console, which means speakers in front of you and behind you. When we closed down Q 2.0, we took this console entirely apart and put it back together. We replaced lots of switches and switch caps. Now it looks pretty much as good as new and sounds as good as it did when it came off the factory at Neve. In addition, there's tons of cool analog gear and tape machines, which we use. That is a big reason to come and record here is the console, the Neve, and all this outboard gear. Spring reverbs, tape echoes. These are all incredibly analog and unique sounding boxes. Also on the wall, you can see a picture of Q 1.0. This is the original Q Division that John and Mike opened in 1986. This was on Albany Street in Boston. That's the very same room that the Pixies recorded Surfer Rosa in. This is Studio A's live room. This is where all the musicians hang out when we're tracking full bands. It's a big room. It's meant and designed to fit lots of different musicians, all playing at the same time, and there's a big window to the control room to make both these rooms feel like the same room and allow great lines of sight. Starting over here, we have a couple of amp rooms for loud things. This is usually where the bass rigs end up. You can see the big Rock SVT bass rig and the smaller B15 bass setup. 90% of bass recorded at Q Division probably goes through those two amps. And there's just another ISO booth for smaller guitar amps, what have you. Sometimes people end up in here, but these are pretty small rooms. The next room is the piano room, which is also where we get the driest, most 70s sounding room in this building. People cut drums in here, vocals. You know, you can fit a bunch of people in here if you'd like. There's about 6 feet of absorption up high and then 1.5 feet to 2 feet of absorption around us behind these panels. So this room sounds really incredibly dead. This is an area we call the inspiration wall. It also has a kind of mixture of dead and live sounding acoustics. People love to hang out down here. This last room is the drum room. It is a medium-sized room that's hard and reflective and bright, which is a kind of complicated acoustic character to get together. We feel like we're getting close with it. We have lots of diffusion on the ceiling. There's even some diffusion behind some of these panels. You can see some diffusers there, keeping the room very lively. Tube mics in here, and our cable storage system is in here. Here is John and Isaac and Q Division's Mellotron.
This is one of our items in our collection of old keyboards. All this stuff has been sampled but made famous among other people by the Beatles and the Moody Blues, and this particular one was owned by Michael Pinder of the Moody Blues, which a lot of them were because he was the Mellotron rep. When you press the keyboards, you're actually playing recorded audio tape. I've got a flute set up and Isaac was going to help us out. Mike Deneen and I started the original Q Division in 1986. We moved to Davis Square and then only in the last year or so have reopened here in this location. We hope that this is the best yet and final Q Division location.
All right, so this is the Q region, incredibly famous chart that explains your level of performance versus the number of takes you've done. And you start here with a great groove and lots of mistakes on your first take, and then as you do more and more takes, you get to a spot where you have no mistakes but no groove, and then you get pretty frustrated and things suck, and then maybe even more upset than that, everything is terrible, and eventually you get to the Q region, which is as yet unexplained, where the performance has great groove and no mistakes. And then as you continue going, the point of diminishing returns arrives and you get to brain death. Brain death. And check out the Mezzanine. This is where we keep more keyboards and drums. Eating area, and there's a little window to Studio A's performance space. You can watch the band recording, or sometimes we have shows and we'll set up speakers and chairs, and if there's too many people downstairs, you can watch the show from up here. And the last thing in the mezzanine room is an edit suite, which we call the clubhouse, where you can catch a nap or edit vocals or tune vocals or heat detect or whatever you're doing. Let's check out Studio B and a few things that we keep along the way. First thing is our mic locker and amp locker and speaker cabinet and plate, reverb, and important toys. This room is bigger on the inside. Right across from the storage room is the pedal world, our guitar pedals and other things. We've got everyone's favorite, the old tone bender, and another tone bender, all very old, and then a well-loved Zvex Fuzz Factory. Can't make a record without that. And of course, everyone's favorite, the Klon. And Studio B's lounge. So Studio B is a smaller studio and a smaller lounge. We're keeping all our guitars in here, lots of basses, lots of kind of utility, funny guitars for situations you might not have a mandocello or a baritone guitar or a 12-string or a Nashville strung guitar, but we have some of those to add color. We have 3 Farfisas in the building. Here's Farfisa 2 of 3. There's another tape sampler, the Chamberlin, vintage Lindrum, and a Juno synth, analog synth. Studio B has the smallest of all live rooms. We do a lot of vocals, voiceover, some guitars and keyboards overdubs in here, even hand claps. The room is so small we keep expecting to come in and find 10 people in here tracking basics, but that hasn't happened yet. This is the control room for Studio B. Studio B is both a stereo mix room and an Atmos mix room. At the center of the room is this SSL XL desk, which is just an analog console with a bunch of 500 slots for all kinds of stuff. The cool thing about this room is that there's a ton of analog processing available, either tube processing or just analog kind of sounding gear to warm up your mixes. If you didn't record here and you want to mix here and get some analog flavor. But even if you did record here and want some analog flavor, there's even some spring reverbs and some cool old digital delays and reverbs. There's also some built-in more tape echoes and tube EQs. These all show up on the patch bay. You don't have to get up and plug into them. They're just there. And you can listen to records if you'd like. Now, since this is an Atmos mix room, if you guys noticed, anywhere you see a light is a speaker. So for instance, peek back here, there are speakers hiding everywhere. There's 4 in the ceiling, 7 around the outside, and a couple of subs. Atmos is called 7.4.1, and it's a really cool immersive audio format. Up here in the corner is one of the original 120 minutes MTV signs that you might remember from watching MTV, or maybe your parents remember from watching MTV. All right, guys, thanks for visiting. You know, we got to get back to making records. We'll see you soon. Bye now.